Yeah, this is just so horrible. It's not... And how about this one? In this video, we will look at the vampire models made by Games Workshop. Which one is the coolest and which one is the ugliest. I'm Alex and you're watching Winterwolf Miniatures. Hello there. I am a human being, which means I have opinions about stuff. Unfortunately, I'm also a millennial, which means I think other people care about them. Whether that's true or not, in this video I will share my opinions on the vampire models made by GW. At the end of the video, I will share my top 5 coolest and ugliest vampires made by Games Workshop, so stick around for that. But let's begin with some history. The first edition of what would be Warhammer Fantasy was released in 1983. I have no memory of this because we millennials wasn't born at that time. I have asked the supreme being, god of all things, the internet, about miniatures from that time and found a few. They are all pretty horrible in today's standard, but miniature production has obviously come a very long. And for its time, there are some really cool sculpts. I will not look at these models from this area in this video because A, they are super old, and B, they are both super cool and super ugly in their own ways. I know nothing about them, so I will not have them in the video. Fast forward to 1992 and the release of 4th edition, which was the first to feature individual army books. I have no memory of this either because I was just a toddler. We have to skip ahead even more to 1994. That was the release of the Undead army book. And in there we find a vampire lord. To me, a solid looking vampire figure. Looks a bit like a high elf, to be honest. But I kinda like it. It's cool. Yeah, it's cool. There are also some rules here for the von Karsteins. Here is Vlad. He has his signature ring, which is cool. And is that a ring in his ear? Weird. I don't like the clothes. And the colors give me a headache. So let's look at Isabella instead. What comes to mind immediately is that the colors is much nicer to the eye. This is actually a cool looking miniature. Faces though. Female faces. As faces go, this is not one of the pretty ones. I'm sorry. But we have to remember at this time these would be hand sculpted, so we have to give them some slack. In 1999, the army book for vampire counts was released. The undead faction had now been split between the scary vampires and the scary mummies. And in this and the coming release was the range of miniatures I grew up with. Not owning many of them perhaps, but definitely eyeing and wanting. Scrolling through the 5th edition Vampire Counts army book, the first vampire model I see is the Red Duke himself. This miniature was actually for sale at Games Workshop web store until just recently. I think it's actually pretty cool, except for the face. It looks stupid. And speaking of ugly faces, let's have a look at the Necrarch. It's not a pretty bunch, is it? These, however, look very cool, I think. This one maybe not with the scroll, no, that face is ugly. And the ugliest of them all, Melchior. I'm sorry, he just looks stupid. I know he's described as ugly in the lore, but this... The beast he's riding looks really cool though, so that makes up for it. A bit. Let's move on with some nicer faces. The Lamians. I miss this, a mounted and an unmounted version of the same miniature. That was cool. Nothing special here. To me, the Lamians have always been a bit meh. But this one is pretty cool. The Blood Dragons. These are the type of vampires I preferred. And these are some cool looking models right here. I especially like this one here, the Battle Standard Bearer model. I think this is the only Battle Standard Bearer that is a vampire. I would really love to know if I'm wrong about this one, so If you know another one, let me know. Thank you. We are now around 6th edition Warhammer Fantasy-ish. But from here on out, there are so many releases, so I'm not gonna bother with the chronicle order. What else do we have? Yeah, the Strigoi. And this, as you can see, is a current version of, while still ugly, I think. Not my cup of tea, at least. They are still looking way cool now compared to their ancestors. I mean, just look at this monstrosity. Fucking A. What is that? Oh, come on. And then we, of course, have the von Karsteins. I have a special bond to these guys, since these two here were my first vampire models I ever owned and painted. I must have been like 13 years old or something when I bought them in my local game store. Maybe living in a very big city that have had all the Games Workshop models ever made for sale. I of course chose this one because they was the cool. No, it was the only one they had. Yeah, it was the only vampire model they had. They are actually pretty ugly, but I kind of like how they look a little like classic movie vampires. There was a model for Manfred, which I think is really cool actually. And he had hair back then. Then sadly something happened to him and he lost it. I believe he's described in some novel I've read by having a shaved head. So he is bald by choice. Maybe to look more evil. Or maybe he was extremely tired of having his hair in his face. Because that happens a lot when you have hair close to your face. Anyway, this model is actually really cool, but I don't like that his arms don't have any armor. It looks weird. I have this model, but it's still unpainted. Maybe someday. I love that sword. It's probably one of the better looking swords in this video. It's too bad he lost it somewhere when the end times came around in 2015. This is of course the current version of Manfred. It's cool. That his cloak fades into ghosts is epic. The new sword he found is sadly not nearly as cool as the old one. But the beast he rides looks badass. Sadly, he has still not found any armor pieces that fit his muscular arms properly. Another vampire you can build with this kit is Neferata. There are many stupid hats in Warhammer Fantasy, and this is one of them. Except for the hat, this is I think a solid looking model. There actually was an old mini for Neferata. Do you want to see it? It has no stupid hat. It does however have a stupid face. Except for that, I think it's actually really cool. And it comes with a familiar. A very angry cat. With a ring on its tail. For some reason. So what's not to like? After a short break from Undead, somewhere around 2004 and 2005, I shifted my focus to other armies who had newer models. When I got back to Undead, the new and shiny range for vampire counts had been released. This was during 7th edition, I believe. And this is the range which most of the models in my army comes from, since it was the range active until the recent release of the new Undead miniatures just a couple of years ago. At this time, Isabella looks like this. I like it. The tits is a bit unnecessary, but the model is really cool otherwise. The hair is amazing. I don't like this paint scheme though, but I've seen the community made some really cool things with this model. Let's look at Vlad. This one is really something. The ghost faces in the cloak, the long hair in the wind, and the really nice sculpt of the face. The armor is really cool and the colors is nice. The pose is flawless. Almost. If I'm going to critique this in any way, maybe the sword is maybe a bit too big. And the model itself was very hard to field in a unit due to the pose. Here is my Vlad. I put him on top of a ruined pillar so that he can be placed in any unit without poking his fellow undead's eyes out with his long blade. I've already covered Manfred from this release, but the von Karsteins got a new member, Konrad. This model is also very cool. The bat cloak is really cool, And the swords are nice, and the armor is great, and the pose is very cool. Not much to say that's negative, except maybe the spike things behind his head. I never liked those. Here is my Conrad. As you can see, I took them away. I put a shield there as a placeholder, but never got around to change it to something nicer. Again, maybe someday. Oh yeah, the winged one. I never had that one. It's very cool, except for the bald head. What's with the bald heads? Someone in charge of vampire designs must really love bald heads, because there's quite a few of them, isn't it? This kit here, what can I say? It's a cool looking blood dragon riding a huge, awesome zombie dragon. So it's obviously very cool. It comes with 2 choices for head, a helmeted one, and yeah, a bald one. This vampire is, however, very cool, and I especially like the lance and the sword. Those are gold. In the new release, a couple of years ago, we got some new Blood Knights. That should be good news. But honestly, I'm not that impressed. While absolutely cool, they miss something. The old kit, except for maybe a silly hat and a wonky face here and there, is to me so much cooler. And if you don't agree with me, please let me know in the comments, because that's always very fun to know. Not that I care, but it's fun either way. There were a female vampire, remember her? Don't know when this is from. It looks older than 7th edition. It's pretty cool. I love the dress and the armor, but it has a silly hat. There are some more female vampires in the Cavern Throne kit. These are really cool, and I've seen people do some amazing things with them in conversions. There should really be more cool female vampire models, I think. I'm not really a fan of the Cavern Throne model though. Built as the Mortis engine, it's cool as fuck. But the throne... I'm not sure. Maybe just a bit too much. Is it too much? Maybe. Speaking of too much, there is a vampire sleeping in the dark coach. So let's bring that into the video. The new kit is cool and all that. I love the shape of the carriage and the ghost driver. It's a bit much, isn't it? It's obviously made to be a centerpiece of a Ninth Haunt army. And it does that really nice. But I prefer the old one. Because I'm a dinosaur. Or maybe I'm just nostalgic, having spent too long eyeing this when in the store when I was a kid. Maybe that's probably why. Let's have a look at something newer. The Crimson Court. When I first saw this, I made a very loud, very squeaky noise. But then I looked closer and... Prince Duval. Overall, I like this one. I don't like the uncovered arms like with Manfred, and I don't particularly like the weird down-facing spikes on the back. But other than that, yeah, it's ace. Gorath. Same problem here. Weird spikes on the back, armor that failed to cover some important parts, and of course, another bald head. I don't like this one. The pose is pretty cool though. Aeneas. This one is just ugly. And has anime hair. Enough said. Velas von Fane. This one is really cool, except for the impossibly large hair. Too bad. If it isn't obvious at this point, I guess I like hair. And I'm pretty sensitive to weird hair. And no hair. The rest of it is really something though, so I still think it's cool. But it could have been very cool if the hair was just a bit smaller. Again, there are too few cool female vampires. Anasta Malkorion was a good try, but come on. What's with the bald heads? I mean, even at female vampires, come on. The pose is awesome though, and the sword is cool, but the neck thing, yeah, it's weird. That's enough with the new ones, so let's break it up with something older. Remember Zacharias? He was a Necroch riding a zombie dragon. He was cool, remind me of Iron Maiden's Eddie. The dragon is also very cool, I think. Let's go very old before we get to the last of the new things. There was a undead warband for Mordheim with a Von Karsten vampire. It's ugly and boring, I really just wanted to show you the ghoul with the backpack here. He's awesome. You can tell he's up to some kind of mischief. I love it. So, Cursed Cities Radakar. The Kossar look is cool, but not really my cup of tea. Too bad really, since he's into wolves, which really is my cup of tea. The wolf pelts is epic, but the hat is silly, and the pants is ugly. As a beast, he's better looking. It's cool, but I would love a more bestial face, to be honest. Bella Dama. What can I say? I love that she's riding a wolf. Don't like anything else. No, it's just weird. And it has a silly hat. Lauka Vai. Yeah, this is just so horrible. It's not even funny, but I can't stop. It's not even funny. The worst part of this is that both halves are amazing in their owns, in themselves. But why are they combined? Why? The upper body is so large you can't use it for anything. I might buy this anyway at some point, as soon as I can find a fitting head for that amazing monster body. Oh, and you can build this as a generic eyesore as well, complete with a bald head. Speaking of something that had potential but was ruined by small details, Kritza, the rat prince. Seriously. Rats. The model is really cool though. The pose, the cane, the clothes. Really my thing here. Just think if those dead rats on his shoulder were a wolf. And don't get me started on the rat tails. Just don't. And how about this one? I don't know what to feel anymore. This is just embarrassing. I think Trovarion said it best. Look at those cute bats braiding his hair. Hilarious. Thumbs down for me. Here is another eyesore. Lady Annika. This is just weird. Very weird. Okay, so there are only 2 more vampires I would like to show you. But they are both in my top 5 coolest vampire lists. So let's go ahead with the lists. And let's start with the coolest, right? At number 5, the Madman in Red, Conrad von Karstein. At number 4, and a model I haven't shown you yet, it's quite rare, it's the Saratosan Vampire. This one is just so cool, I can't really explain what it is. Everything, I suppose, is probably... He probably have a bald head under that cap though, wouldn't you think? Number 3. Well, it's no other than Kato Ezekiel. A wonderful model. It's simply cool, without being over the top. Number 2. The Old Blood Knights, of course. As a set of all 5, and probably just this champion himself, to be honest. That fur thing he has slung over his right shoulder is just epic, and the armor of these guys is just... The banner is great as well. Number 1, the coolest vampire model made by Games Workshop, in my opinion. It can only be Vlad. There were never going to be anyone else. Let's move on to the list you are really here for. The ugliest vampires from Games Workshop. This was tough. I mean, there are so many bald heads to choose from. No. No, before I make someone unnecessarily angry, I have nothing against people with bald heads. It's just a thing. It's just become a thing in this video. I don't. Okay, so the top 5 ugliest vampire models ever. Or from recent times, from Games Workshop. Shall I draw this out any longer? No. Number 5 does not have a bald head, but it got a tail. In fact, it got many of them. It's the Rat Prince. The tails. If it wasn't for the tails dragging behind him, making the model need a special base to make room for them, he wouldn't be anywhere near this list. Okay, so number 4. I'm just going to say it. It's the Disney princess, vampire. Number 3. With a face not even a mother could love. And a name that is very hard to say. It's Melchior. Honestly. I think he looks more like a ferret than a vampire. Cool and collected. Number 2. With a face a mother could love. On a stick. It's Lady Annika. And the prestigious first place in the list of the top 5 ugliest vampires goes to this thing. Whatever that is. Did I miss any vampires? Did you agree with my top 5s? Please let me know in the comments, and while you're down there, make sure to hit like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.